You are not wired to wait, you are wired to move. Yet most people lie suspended in hesitation, not because they lack discipline, but because they misunderstand how their own biology works. They wait for motivation, for clarity, for the mythical perfect moment when everything aligns. Dopamine is not the molecule of happiness. It is the molecule of pursuit, of seeking, of forward drive. It was never designed to reward you for sitting still or fantasizing about what could be. It was designed to push you into action, to create hunger for the next step, and to keep your system engaged in movement, not comfort. From deep within the midbrain, the dopamine system acts like a compass, pulling you toward what you believe matters most. But that compass doesn't point to results. It points to effort. It lights up not when you get the thing, but when you chase it with everything in you. That's the key most people miss. The reward is in the reach. The biology of your body is built to favor motion over meditation, action over anticipation, and pursuit over passive dreaming. The human brain was sculpted through millennia of tension and risk. Dopamine systems were forged in fires of survival, where those who moved lived, and those who waited died. That ancient wiring is still inside you now. Every time you delay, every time you say, "not yet," every time you let emotion dictate action, you train those circuits to lower their response. And slowly, the system that was made to generate hunger, to drive progress, begins to go quiet. You feel it as stagnation, as indecision, as lethargy, but underneath it all, the mechanism is still there. It's just starving. And what it's starving for is friction, strain, challenge, the very ingredients that awaken dopamine from dormancy and bring it roaring back to life. When you act, especially when it's uncomfortable, you activate a chain reaction in the brain. Dopamine is released into key areas like the nucleus accumbens and prefrontal cortex, signaling motivation, clarity, and movement. You don't wait for this to happen, you cause it to happen, and once it begins, your brain learns. It learns that effort is the gateway. That struggle is not punishment. It is the signal for reward. That stepping forward without permission is the trigger for transformation. This is not a trick. It's not a hack. It's the hardwiring of the human spirit meeting the laws of the nervous system. And when you align with it, when you stop waiting and start acting, you unlock a power that doesn't rely on willpower. It becomes reflex. You are not weak for lacking motivation. You are not broken for hesitating. You're simply untrained in the language your biology speaks. And that language is action, not talk, not planning, not waiting for the perfect mood. The dopamine system responds to energy, to movement, to risk. And when you give it what it wants, it floods your system with the chemistry of forward progress. That's what it was built to do, and that's what you were built to follow. You are carrying within you the code of pursuit, the fire of a system that was never designed to be idle. It is not inspiration you lack. It is ignition, and once you light that fire, everything else begins to burn away. Action precedes motivation because the architecture of your nervous system is built to respond to motion, not to emotion. The myth that you must feel ready before taking action is one of the most destructive beliefs you can carry. It paralyzes the very circuits that are designed to come alive when you move, not before. The dopamine system does not surge in anticipation of you thinking about action. It surges as a consequence of you engaging your body and mind in the task itself. That means motivation is not the starting line, it's the reward. It is the biochemical consequence of choosing to push forward when the friction is high, and the comfort of waiting feels deceptively safe. This is rooted in neurobiology, not positive thinking. When you initiate effort, real effort, not symbolic motion, the brain's mesolimbic system is activated, and dopamine begins to pulse into the striatum and prefrontal cortex. These areas are responsible for focus, planning, and execution, but they don't light up from passivity. They light up when you take the first step. That step can be small, even silent, but the brain knows. It tracks the cost, it tracks the resistance, and when you move anyway, it begins to shift your internal chemistry in real time. That shift is not just a sensation, it's a signal to the rest of your system. We are now in pursuit. That signal triggers a cascade of engagement that deepens your clarity, stabilizes your attention, and builds momentum that cannot be accessed from stillness. When people wait for motivation, they unknowingly trap themselves in the wrong sequence. They wait for a feeling that is biologically reserved for the result of action. The longer they wait, the more the neural pathways of inaction are reinforced and the harder it becomes to start. This becomes a feedback loop of hesitation, where the very circuits designed to drive you forward atrophy from lack of use. But the opposite is also true. When you reverse the sequence, when you act first, even with low confidence or low energy, you begin to engage the dopamine system properly. You build the association between effort and reward, between motion and meaning, and that rewiring becomes the foundation of unstoppable momentum. The body must lead, the breath must deepen, the step must be taken before the feeling arrives. This is how your biology was designed to work. Waiting is not rest. It is a slow erosion of power, because every second you delay, you're not just holding back action, you're suppressing the very chemistry required to make action feel right. That chemistry comes after. The nervous system learns by doing, and when you do, even without motivation, the brain begins to shift from passive observation to active engagement. It becomes alert, focused, driven, not because you tricked it, but because you aligned with its fundamental rule. Action is the signal. Motivation is the response. You move first, then your biology catches up. Waiting reinforces neural pathways of hesitation and avoidance because the brain is a pattern recognition machine. It wires itself based on what you repeatedly do, not what you say you want to do. Every time you hesitate, every time you allow doubt or comfort to override action, your nervous system encodes that choice. Synaptic connections strengthen around inaction. Neural circuits become more efficient at doing nothing. The longer you wait, the more fluent your brain becomes in the language of delay, and the harder it becomes to override that inertia. This isn't laziness, it's learning. Your brain is always learning. And if you let waiting become your default, your biology will normalize it as the path of least resistance. This process happens beneath your awareness. Circuits in the basal ganglia, responsible for habit formation and behavior repetition, begin to favor inaction as the brain's automatic response to challenge. The threshold for discomfort lowers. You begin to avoid not just major tasks, but anything that carries emotional weight, complexity, or perceived failure. The more you wait, the more you condition your system to associate pause with protection, and that association becomes a trap. Your brain starts to equate hesitation with safety, even though it's the very thing keeping you stuck. It's not that action is harder, it's that your neural blueprint is now rigged for resistance. Avoidance, too, becomes chemically reinforced. When you choose to delay a difficult task, you often experience a brief sense of relief. That dopamine spike, however shallow, trains your brain to expect reward from retreat. And the biology doesn't differentiate between short-term relief and long-term failure. It just learns hesitation equals less discomfort, less risk, less energy. But that dopamine hit is counterfeit. It doesn't build momentum. It robs you of drive. Over time, it leads to lower motivation, lower self-trust, and chronic indecision, not because you lack discipline, but because you've trained your nervous system to protect you from the very stretch. That would make you stronger, but this, too, can be reversed. If you want to break the loop, the first step is to understand the stakes. Every time you act in the presence of resistance, you reclaim a piece of your biology. You lay down new neural pathways, ones that reward courage over comfort, decision over delay. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious action and goal direction, begins to regain control from the limbic system that seeks only short-term safety. You stop flinching, you stop freezing, you start becoming fluent in the language of motion, in the rhythm of action, before feeling. And the more often you do it, the easier it becomes, not because life gets easier, but because your brain becomes optimized for challenge instead of escape. You must stop rehearsing hesitation. You must stop making delay your ritual. Because every moment you wait, you're not just losing time. You're training your mind to retreat from the very life it was built to conquer. The brain learns momentum through repetition of effort, not through emotion. Emotion is fleeting. It's a signal, not a strategy. It comes and goes with sleep, food, light, temperature, and thousands of other inputs you can't fully control. But effort, deliberate, structured, repeated effort, is what actually rewires the nervous system for persistence, for drive, and for relentless execution. Every time you show up and do the work regardless of how you feel, you are conditioning your brain to prioritize action over emotion. You're teaching the prefrontal cortex to take command over the limbic system. You're building a machine that doesn't ask for permission. It moves because it must. Neurons that fire together wire together. This is not theory, it is neurophysiology. When you repeatedly act in the face of internal resistance, you strengthen the communication between the motivational centers of the brain and the regions responsible for planning and execution. Dopaminergic neurons begin to associate the process of showing up, not just the outcome, with reward. You reprogram the system. The reward no longer comes after the finish line. It begins at the starting line. This is the difference between people who are pulled by motivation and those who are pushed by mission. Motivation is unstable. Mission becomes automatic when repetition is weaponized. You do not become consistent by waiting for better moods. You become consistent by honoring the reps, by anchoring your identity to behavior instead of impulse. Every cold start, every low-energy session, every silent victory over resistance lays a stronger myelin sheath over the neural pathways of discipline. That sheath is physical. It's the insulation that allows signals to fire faster and more efficiently. And it only comes with repetition, not once, not sometimes, but daily, deliberate, discomfort-based repetition. You're not just building habits, you're building a neural infrastructure that makes habits inevitable. And that infrastructure doesn't care if you're inspired. It doesn't need a reason to begin. It becomes the reason. Once the repetition becomes the ritual, your brain stops relying on emotion to act. It starts acting as a reflex. The friction at the start decreases, the resistance curve flattens, and momentum becomes the new baseline. You train the nervous system to value the act itself, to crave the clarity that only comes from effort. And once that shift occurs, you become the kind of person who doesn't just talk about change. You embody it in movement, in rhythm, in compounding action. This is how warriors are built, not in the fire of intensity, but in the rhythm of repetition. You don't need to feel powerful to become powerful. You need to act powerfully again and again until the circuits reflect the identity you're forging. Emotion will rise and fall like a tide, but effort, consistent, repeated, undeniable effort etches momentum into your biology. And that momentum becomes your edge, your engine, your signature. Low dopamine states can be reversed by intentional challenge and movement, not by waiting, not by consuming more stimulation, not by trying to think your way out. The nervous system is dynamic, not fixed. It's designed to respond to inputs, and when dopamine levels are depleted when your drive is low, your energy is flat, your motivation feels numb. The answer is not passivity, it's pressure. But the pressure must be self-imposed, deliberate, and grounded in challenge, because challenge is the signal the brain has been waiting for. And when it receives that signal, it begins to shift chemically, electrically, behaviorally. The very molecules that once felt inaccessible are now produced as a direct response to movement. Dopamine isn't given, it's earned. It's synthesized and released when you lean into effort, especially effort that demands more from you than you feel capable of giving. Physical movement is a trigger: walking, training, breath under strain. Cognitive intensity is a trigger: deep work, discomfort in focus. Emotional restraint is a trigger resisting impulses, delaying gratification. Each one of these sends a message to the nervous system: I'm no longer waiting. I'm working, and the system responds. Dopamine rises, not all at once, but enough to create motion, enough to create friction where there was apathy, enough to reawaken the circuits that fuel momentum. Low dopamine doesn't mean you're broken. It means the reward system has been hijacked or silenced, hijacked by overstimulation, scrolling, sugar, novelty, silenced by inactivity, too much comfort, not enough consequence. And the only way to reset that system is to create a new context, one where dopamine is earned, not leaked. You earn it by pushing, you earn it by reaching, you earn it by moving when stillness feels easier. That's when the reward returns, not in fireworks, but in quiet fire, in the subtle shift from fatigue to focus, from numbness to hunger, from surviving to pursuing. This is the biology of hope, not a wish, but a switch, a process that anyone can engage in, regardless of how depleted they feel. You don't need to feel ready. You need to move, because movement reactivates the ancient systems that were designed to pull you forward, even in darkness. The dopamine system is not fragile, it's adaptive, but it only adapts to the inputs you give it. Starve it, and it retreats. Feed it wisely, and it rebuilds itself from the ground up, through pain, through resistance, through intentional demand on the system. When dopamine is low, your world shrinks. Everything feels harder than it is. But when dopamine rises even slightly, possibility returns. And that's the tipping point, not motivation, not perfection, just enough chemical signal to move again. And from there the loop begins. Movement begets dopamine, dopamine begets movement, and slowly, deliberately, power returns, not as a gift, but as a consequence of choosing challenge over collapse, forward motion over freeze, biology over belief. You train your drive system by doing hard things before you feel ready, because readiness is not a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. The circuits responsible for grit, resilience, and forward action are not activated by comfort, and they are certainly not triggered by overthinking. They come online through exposure to challenge, especially when it feels like the wrong moment to act. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths in neuroscience. Waiting until you feel ready weakens the system, but acting before you're ready wires it for strength. Your biology doesn't reward hesitation. It rewards the will to move in the presence of doubt. Inside your brain, the dopaminergic system is not just reacting to external rewards, it's being sculpted by the process of pursuit. When you take action before the emotional conditions are favorable, you place demand on the prefrontal cortex to override limbic resistance. That demand is a signal that strengthens the neural pathways associated with self, command, and the more often you issue that command and follow through, the stronger the pathway becomes. This is how discipline is encoded not in theory, but in the silent reps where you deny delay and engage anyway. Doing hard things when it's easy builds competency, but doing hard things when it feels impossible builds identity. That identity is not formed through vision boards or affirmations. It is carved into the nervous system by the friction of choosing action in defiance of your feelings. It is not a motivational trick. It is a transformation that happens at the level of synapse and signal. Each repetition without readiness becomes a proof point, a vote for the version of yourself that doesn't rely on convenience. And over time, your biology stops flinching. The resistance doesn't vanish, but your response changes. You move forward with less negotiation, with more certainty, with more intensity. This is the foundation of mental toughness, not bravado, not hype, but neurological conditioning. And that conditioning doesn't start when you feel like it. It starts precisely when you don't. The first alarm in the morning. The workout you want to skip. The project you've been avoiding. These aren't just decisions, they are invitations to forge a system of drive that operates independently of emotion. Every time you accept the invitation, even for 1 minute, you're building something sacred, a nervous system that obeys vision over feeling, purpose over mood. You want a brain that doesn't stall under stress, train it to act when stress is present. You want a nervous system that doesn't fold under pressure. Expose it to pressure voluntarily. The more often you do what's difficult before you're ready, the more you condition your entire system to stop searching for comfort and start creating motion. That is how real drive is built, not in comfort, not in waiting, but in fire. And every day you step into that fire, your biology remembers who you are.